Only two decisions, Eisenhower's to greenlight D-Day and Harry Truman's to drop the atom bomb on Japan, uh, for me, produced the most important results of World War II. For the sake of time, I'll roll those two decision points into one as I talk about the war's legacy, and then I'll have one separate final thought on the legacy of the atom bomb. The legacy of World War II has been fading for generations and eventually will be forgotten. And here's why. After the Battle of Iwo Jima, Admiral Nimitz said uncommon valor was a common virtue. The same can be said for all U.S. forces fighting the threat of tyranny from December 1941 until August 1945. Those American fighters left us a legacy of continued freedom and the realization that we, along with all other world citizens, must never let future despots like Hitler threaten our freedom and the world harmony that World War II produced. From D-Day and the atom bomb, we benefited from a new world order of peace and unity. Well, sort of. But the legacy the veterans of our greatest generation gave us is dying, just as they one day will pass from our presence. As time goes by, World War II and all that happened will only be found in history books without living veterans or historians like us right now to remind everyone of the legacy they gave us. Future Americans will forget the lessons and legacy of the Second World War. It's already beginning. Genocide is used in places like Africa and Syria. We have factions that question the existence of such atrocities during World War II. I read somewhere about a German activist who called Nazism a poop stain on the 1,000-year history of Germany. Our longtime allies, Great Britain, France, and Germany, have been insulted, minimized, and cast aside by our current president, who has a naive fondness for despots like Putin and Kim Jong-un, China's Xi, and they're all communist leaders, by the way. As our 75-year-old legacy fades away, like MacArthur's old soldier, we look to an uncertain future. Maybe we won't live to experience it, but we are seeing the beginning of what could become a dystopian society here in the USA. The key phrase is could become. If the America I grew up in sticks to its values of love and freedom, well, that's never going to happen. The atomic bomb opened up the atomic age. We live in the atomic age, which has given us breakthroughs in science and medicine. The atom bomb has also given the world a preview of Armageddon. That's a horrible legacy, but it's one that keeps world powers from declaring another world war because they know the next world war will be mankind's last. Indispensable individual figures. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I'll use a litany. Stalin in the Red Army, enough said. Hitler refusing to release his panzers on the D-Day invasion force was extremely helpful. His stubborn insistence that the invasion would be at Pas-de-Calais caused the Fuhrer to maintain his defenses there for 2 months beyond D-Day. Churchill was a pain in Eisenhower's endgame, but his agreement to go along with the D-Day landings made all the difference to the success of the Allied initiative. President Roosevelt deciding to allow research into an atom bomb back in October 1941. Marshall choosing Eisenhower was a critical decision, but someone made a huge impact on General Marshall 3 years before the D-Day landings. The economist Simon Kuznets issued a report that laid out the financial limitations of combat operations in the coming years, concluding that an amphibious invasion of northwestern France wasn't possible until mid-1944. General Marshall listened, and Kuznets was right about D-Day. Eisenhower's decision to have General Patton head up Operation Fortitude, a massive-scale diversion I mentioned earlier that made Hitler think the invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais. Eisenhower's decision to use Patton made the diversion even more believable to the Germans because Patton was arguably their worst nightmare. At times, George, as Omar Bradley called him, was Ike's worst nightmare too. General Wesley Groves headed up the Manhattan Project, delivering Fat Man and Little Boy to Tinian just in the nick of time. President Truman had by far the most difficult decision of all. Harry must have spent some dark, lonely hours possibly praying before deciding to unleash, quote, a rain of ruin from the air, the likes of which have never been seen on this earth.